Hey, good morning everyone, it's Keen again. So as you guys probably know if you're watching this video, last night the patch notes for version 5.2.0 of Splatoon 2 did drop, and it didn't contain the exact changes a lot of people were looking forward to necessarily, including me. Some stuff did surprise me, some stuff does make sense to me, but the main thing I want to talk about in this video, because it's something I've had multiple DMs about, people asking me since I'm kind of the person to ask about these things, because if you're not familiar with me, I mean the Tenta Brella, the Spot Brella, Sorella Brella, that kind of general class of weapons. So people have been wondering, okay, what are your thoughts on the nerfs for Tenta Brella? So I kind of want to make this video to just talk about that for a bit. I mean, obviously, whenever you get your weapon nerfed, it's never a good feeling, but I've always been a believer that this weapon has been super strong, and I think the results in Japan definitely reflect that, especially in Zones Cup. It has such a high success rate, so I'm not really surprised that this has happened. I've always been of the opinion if Tent were to get nerfed again, oh, what would you expect to get nerfed? My answer would always be, oh, the shield regeneration speed will probably get hit, and that is one of the two changes that I'm going to go over. So, okay, just to start here, what are the exact changes? Let's talk about it. It says the English patch notes that just dropped a couple hours ago before I'm recording this, but it says two changes. One, extended the time it takes to restore the umbrella portion after launching it, or it being destroyed by roughly 40 out of 60 seconds. Basically, that means Splatoon 2 is a game that runs at 60 frames per second, so when it says 40 over 60 seconds, it's essentially just 40 frames, so it's a little bit less than a full second. If you go over here into the version history of Tenta Brella, the way it's been for a very long time, ever since 3.0, is that it took 5 seconds from when you shoot the shield out to it coming back. So essentially, this means instead of 5 seconds, it is a little bit under 6 seconds. So 5 seconds and then the additional 40 frames. So back in 3.0, when they changed the time from 6 seconds to 5 seconds, even now with that nerf, it's not necessarily, it's still not to the level it was before 3.0. So really, it isn't that huge of a nerf. The big thing for it really is that it kind of just adds more downtime to the weapon. And I can kind of show you what I mean. So this is version 5.1.0. So this is obviously the state of the game where it takes 5 seconds. So you shoot your shield and then it'll take a 5 second regen time. The big thing about 5 seconds is once you hear the clicky noise, you can immediately set up another shield. So with really good timing, you can put yourself in very dangerous scenarios. And because it takes 5 seconds, you can immediately be prepared by the time the first shield runs out. So essentially it's kind of making a little bit more of a cooldown on the weapon in that sense. And I think that's a fair change. That's always the kind of change I expected if they were going to go for the weapon again. And the second change to Tenta Brella, this patch, is that it has increased in consumption for spread shots by roughly 10%. So if we go over here to this website, I put in Tenta Brella. So the way Tenta Brella works is that each shot of the main weapon, just, shooting the weapon normally, takes 10% of the ink tank. So you would get 10 shots by default from a full tank without running any investment. It's a bit tricky to kind of get numbers pinpointed on when you launch your shield, because it involves you holding the shield open. That obviously depletes more ink, so that's a bit tricky. I don't know if there's a raw number in that. I'm not super familiar with that, so I don't want to get very particular with that, but in general, just say you have 10 shots basically. So 10 shots base tank is 10%. If you reduce the efficiency by 10%, essentially you take the 10% it takes to shoot a shot, the 1% from that, so now it's 11% per shot. So now if you don't run any efficiency, you're down from 10 shots full in a full tank without any investment to 9. But there's something interesting in the case of Tenta Brella, because Tenta Brella falls into a category of weapons, a few weapons in this game, that have a high ink saver main curve. And what that means is when you invest into ink saver main, it has a higher curve in smaller amounts, like 1 sub, 2 sub, 3 sub, 4 sub kind of thing. So it's interesting because if you look at the list of weapons here, none of the other weapons, as far as Splatoon 2 is concerned, have been hit in the ink efficiency department. We had Nerf for Hydra, but that's like a special custom and custom. We've had Nerfs on Perf for main power curve, same for H3, but it's never been the case where one of these other weapons, aside from Tent, has had an ink efficiency nerf. So if you really just calculate the numbers, it's really not as bad as you may think, because let's take, for example, this would be in the current build of the game, for example. So 10% per tank, right? I run 2 subs, let's say, for this patch. So then it goes down from 10% per shot to 8.539. So if you go over here, that would be, about 11 shots. If you're just shooting raw, not including the Tenta Brella holding stuff. So, that's like an additional shot for 2 subs is not too bad. If you put 3 subs, then it's 8.068. And that gives you 12 shots in the current patch before the nerf. So if you want to kind of calculate what it would be post nerf, then you can kind of just take this 100 divided by 10 for 1 shot and then times 0.9. So yeah, you would get the 9 shots base. So what you could do to kind of calculate, at least it should be, assuming the numbers are correct and I'm doing this right, then I could take my current build and then I could do 8.539 instead. So post patch, if I were to run the same 2 subs, I would get the base shot, which is 10, which is what it currently has. A little bit more than that, but you can see how you're losing a couple of shots, but the high ink saver main curve is really good for it in that regard. So, let's say hypothetically I want to get back to a pre-patch benchmark of 11 shots. Okay, so what I calculated earlier is if I do 4 subs of ink saver main, then this will put it at 7.659. So that would get me roughly to where I was pre-patch, because this is 11.750. And if I take the 2 subs from here, 8.539. So this would be the current patch, what I get, and this would be post-patch. So post-patch with a 4 sub investment, I would essentially get a little bit more than what a 2 sub investment would be now. So realistically, that's not that bad. It's only a couple of subs. And if you take into account other kinds of builds for Tenta Brella, let's say you're the kind of person who wants to come back, every time you activate comeback, that's another main of ink saver main, and that's really useful because, again, of that kind of high ink saver main curve. It's not like you can kind of compare this to another weapon that's had its ink efficiency adjusted very, very heavily in this game. Let's talk like Explosher. The thing about Explosher is in the singular patch, they made it go from 9%, so 11 shots base, to 11.5 per shot, and that alone cuts you down from 11 shots to I think 8, if I'm doing that right off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure it's 8. So that's a massive change, and Expo doesn't get the ink saver main curve. So I don't think this ink efficiency nerf is really that huge on Tenta Brella. It takes a couple more subs to get back to what you were initially, really. The next thing I want to talk about in regards to Tenta Brella kind of talks in the particulars of vanilla Tenta Brella, because vanilla Tenta Brella's kit has been touched in this patch because they did do some changes to Bubble Blower as a special. So let's read over those. Bubble Blower has a few changes. One of them can be considered a buff and the other ones could be considered nerfs, and the buff that they gave it is essentially to kind of compensate for the kind of nerf they gave it. So the first change is the buff. It said extended the time until a bubble pops naturally by 2 seconds. If you go over here and look at the history of Bubble Blower, back in 4.3.1, they decreased the amount of time bubbles naturally linger on the field. If you don't pop the bubble, you just leave it there, it'll dissipate on its own. But back when the bubbles first launched, it took 18 seconds for that, which is a very, very long time in a game such as this. So back then they changed it from 18 seconds to 12 seconds. What this patch does is it essentially adds 2 seconds back. So instead of the 12 seconds we currently have, it's 14. And I think that's a good thing as a kind of compensation for this nerf, but I also think it's good in the context of a weapon that doesn't use quick pops, such as Tenta Brella, because Tenta Brella will often put itself in positions to kind of stall at this. You may sit inside your bubble and try and get people to look at you and kind of just have this little like shootout where they're trying to deflate your bubble, but you're sitting inside of it, and this goes on for 12 seconds now, but post-patch this could be 14. And with the nerf that they did to the shield regeneration speed, this could actually be really useful because it could give you an additional couple seconds to kind of get another shield. But on the converse of that, that buff is to compensate the nerfs that Bubble Blower received. And they kind of are doing a little bit of a rework here. It says in the next note, reduce the size of the first and second bubbles. The first bubble is the smallest, the second is slightly larger, and the third bubble onward will be the same size as before. And the area over which damage is dealt and the area which is inked by an exploding bubble depends on the size of the bubble. And that's how it's always been. But essentially it's changing how it works from now. The current state of Bubble Blower before this patch is that every single bubble has the same exact size, scaled with your special power-up, because special power-up increases that size of bubbles on the hitbox, the paint, all of that. But this essentially makes it so the first bubble is the very smallest, second bubble a little bit bigger than the first one, and the third one would be the same size as pre-patch. So essentially they're making it so the initial bubbles are smaller and their hitboxes will be smaller, the paint will be less, all that kind of stuff. But here's the thing, and that's why that's kind of big for quick pop weapons, say like Foil Squeezer, for example, because Foil will often do the quick pop thing where you roll a bomb, throw your first bubble, throw a second bubble, throw the bomb at the first bubble, cause that chain reaction that can get a lot of kills. And that's kind of the primary thing a lot of people were complaining about. And it's pretty cheesy because if you can't react to it, then it's kind of a little bit silly. There are ways around it, like running a sub bomb defense can make it so the 50 damage and the 50 damage you won't die, because bomb defense can lower that damage a little, just right below 100, so you could live that. But there were kind of extreme circumstances where people would kind of be bunched up together and you get a quick pop and some crazy like kill streak of like 2 or 3, and just it was very quick way to kill a lot of people. So that's kind of what they're trying to address here, really, and what they're trying to nerf. And I think this is a big nerf in the sense of quick pop weapons more so, because again, Tenta Brella, the size of the first bubble and second bubble being smaller, that does suck, but it's for weapon like Tent, it's going to be using it for more so to stall. The bigger thing that I haven't really seen people talking about with regard to this nerf is that way back when bubbles were kind of a bit overbearing, is that in 2.2.0 they made it easier for bubbles to be popped by opponents' attacks when they've shrunken by a certain amount. So basically there's a multiplier added to the damage bubbles receive once they're beneath a certain size. So by shrinking the size the bubble is by default on the first and second one compared to the third one, it kind of makes it easier to kind of just react and like throw a bomb at it, basically, because if it's already below a certain level, take that multiplier and it'll be really easy to deflate. So that's essentially what they're going for with that. And in the context of something like Tenta Brella, right? Let's say Tenta Brella's committing to a position with the bubble, right? So it's pretty often you'll see a Tenta Brella will kind of just throw its shield into a corner, right? Like say I want to like push this direction, I'll kind of like creep into the corner, and if my shield's about to dissipate and there are people shooting out on the other side, then it's pretty common for V10 to just like put a bubble here. So the thing is, this first bubble would be the smallest, and then this one would be a little bit bigger, and then the final one would be the largest. But the thing is, post-patch, it'll be such that this bubble's the same, this one's the smallest, and this one is bigger than this one, but smaller than this one. So that first bubble disappears after 12 seconds, it happens 12 seconds after each initial bubble is let go of. So post-patch will also be a little bit smaller in the first two, but they will last 2 seconds longer. So I think that'll be really relevant in a mode like spot zones and cloud modes particularly, because you kind of don't necessarily just go for the quick pop to kill some people in those kinds of modes. You can often just leave the bubbles on the zone to kind of keep it there, sort of a stage hazard, prevent people from kind of walking into it. Just it's the general map presence you have to respect, and it can sustain pushes super hard in modes like Clan Blitz. And that's kind of the thing that vanilla Exposure thrived at back in its peak before custom happened and the bubble nerfs and such happened, because Exposure's output of bubbles was just so high, and because they lingered for so long, it was just such an oppressive weapon, because Exposure itself is just chunking 90 damage hitboxes at people with good aim or the 35, and just causes all this pain and all this output of bubbles. Like, it was common back then, you would see Exposures getting like 8 bubbles, 9 bubbles, 10 bubbles, and I say this because I played Exposure a bit more back then. It actually won a smaller LAN with it way back in like right before Custom Expo and Ballpoint Nouveau and all that came out, if I remember. Like, yeah, like 500,000 on it. So I'm kind of speaking from experience, just like as a general bubble player, I'm someone who kind of understands the quick pops because I also have a lot of paint and stuff like Kensa Jr. I play with Soldier, who's a foil squeezer main, so kind of just talking in the perspective of someone who knows the special really well. Overall in changes, I think they're fair changes, for sure. I honestly think a weapon like Ballpoint Spotling got hit a bit harder this patch than Tenta Brella overall, for sure. So the question is from here, what are my overall thoughts on the nerfs on Tenta Brella and the Bubble Blower? I think they are justified. I think they are fair. I'd appreciate if stuff like armor and K-Shot, get addressed in the future. But, overall, I think it's nothing too harsh. It's kind of just a little slap on the wrist for Tent, and that's fine by me at the end of the day. It's not going to ruin my enjoyment of the weapon. I love playing this, so I don't have any intention of dropping it. If people really want me to, I can discuss other parts of the patch as well in their own video or just on stream. People can let me know. And if you want to see more content from me, I'll have my Twitter, Twitch in the description. And you can feel free to sub for more videos like this on YouTube as well. I'm kind of just starting out on videos, so it's a process of me learning between editing, all that kind of deal, and I look forward to making more stuff. But that's kind of all I got for this video, so let me guys know what you think about the patch overall. Are you happy about it, disappointed? Did you want to see more buffs? Do you want to see more nerfs? Generally, I like seeing more buffs than nerfs, but small stuff like this I think is okay. But I'd like to see more substantial buffs than just reducing the special on something like 83 and CRB, because I don't think that's quite enough to make an impact, because those weapons have a myriad of their own issues that kind of prevent them from being super viable anyway. and I hope you guys have a lovely morning, day, night, whatever it may be, wherever you may be. And I'll see you guys around next time.